Tonight we have in conversation author Shelley Herman, author of My Peacock Tale, Secrets of an NBC Page. And joining her, Jim Colucci, a freelance entertainment writer and author whose books include Will and Grace, Fabulously Uncensored, Golden Girls Forever, and All in the Family, the show that changed television. Please give it up for Jim.
Hey, everybody. I was so happy when Shelley asked me to talk with her today because I was so impressed. I'm going to start out with a commercial for the book because why not? We're in a bookstore. I was so impressed with My Peacock Tale because it's a little bit of everything. I think that if you are in the business, you will certainly love all the names in here, the people from classic eras of television. But it's also a story about a woman finding her way in this business. It's a story about what it was like to be a woman in the 70s, what it was like to be in the 70s in general. There's some interesting stories in here. I'm gonna pitch it as, I think it's 30 Rock meets Minx, if you've seen the show Minx. And I think that's because it's got its juicy stories in here, and they're all structured so well. If there's a TV executive in here, this is a series. And a lot of these stories make great episodes. So that's my selling. Now I know a lot of you in here know some of these stories personally because since we're in LA, a lot of you are people who are featured in them and know Shelley from the NBC Page program, which is really the backbone, the spine of this book because it is the beginning of her career. But as we will soon see, it has the group of NBC Pages still meets and are friends to this day. And in this industry, we all give each other jobs and help each other out. So it's the spine of a lot of the things that happened to Shelley. A lot of the people here are from Agora High School, from her earliest days. There are people from when she worked at a tax office, from when she was in Andy Goldberg's improv group, from when she was an actor who starred in 3 TV series, including a stint co-hosting a monster truck show. This is a woman who's done everything, and again, the NBC Page program prepares you for that, right? To every department, you learn all the skills. She's hosted 8 infomercials, was heard locally and nationally on syndicated radio shows, and was nominated for an Emmy for her writing. She's also written numerous game shows, and most of you, of course, though, know her from the Page program. So let's talk to Shelley about it. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, Shelley Herman.
Welcome to my book mitzvah. Today I am an author.
Have a nosh. Later there'll be dancing. We're going to hoist her up on that chair.
Thank you everybody for coming. There's so many different parts of my life that are represented here tonight, and we've got family, we've got lots of friends, we've got work colleagues, we've got people who still need to file their taxes. They're all here tonight.
Well, I'm going to start from the beginning of the backbone, as I say, of the story. So I know you can start with even high school, but when did you first learn what a page was and that there was a such thing as this NBC Page program?
Well, you mentioned Agora High School. 2 of my former teachers are here this evening. Ellen Daniel and Jim Bodakovich. And she even said that my spelling and stuff was good in the book. So
your teachers love you.
When I was in high school, we had the opportunity to go to a taping of the Midnight Special, which was taped at NBC Burbank. And I saw these people standing around in these ugly uniforms, listening to rock and roll music for free, and they were getting paid to do it. So I thought, I could do that, not realizing that the NBC Page program is like one of the hardest jobs to get as an entry-level job in the entertainment industry. And through some wonderful circumstances, including a girl's trip to Vegas to see Elvis.
Which is a great episode. Again, if this were a series, that's a great episode in itself.
Yeah, because not everything stayed in Vegas. I met a girl who was kind of the shy girl, and I hung out with her for a while in Vegas, and it turned out her mom was best friends with Jean Messerschmidt. My Page friends might remember that name. She was compliance and practices person. And Gene came and saw me working in the Sears Junior Bazaar department called Eva Hawkins, and that's how I got my interview and how I got my job.
So it's a little bit of, in that case, being the right place at the right time, right? But you also had your eyes open to that opportunity. You noticed these pages doing their job and had the foresight, and even at that young age, to look into it. Not everybody would have that.
Well, the only other job I'd had at that point is I was a volunteer usher at the Valley Music Theater in Woodland Hills. I don't know if this is a domed building. It eventually became a Jehovah's Witness temple. But I got to usher Jack Benny and Woody Allen, and it was like I knew how to do that. And I actually was like the only thing I could put on my resume. So that's kind of why I thought I could do the page job. And at the time I hadn't graduated college. Now what they say is they receive about 16,000 applications a year for the job. And if you fill out the online registration and send in a 2-minute video, and you're one of the 2% that gets selected, then they fly you either to New York or to Los Angeles to meet you in person. And to NBC's credit, what they're doing is they're paying for you to come out to interview with them. And they put you up in a hotel and they give you per diem. Unfortunately, they don't have the tour in Burbank anymore, but at 30 Rock, they still have the tour and ushering TV shows.
What were the numbers, do you remember, when you applied in terms of the selectivity and the number of applications they got?
I don't have an exact number, but
it was very.
We were always told that it was like the hardest job to get in show business. And you could only keep it for 18 months because you were expected to make all the contacts you needed to make so that you could get a real job and not have to schlep people from Starlight Tours and Orange Coast Tours around the building all day.
Well, it's interesting because you can name some of the famous people who've gone through that program, but what it seems to me is it's one of those jobs that requires every skill you can have in this business, because you end up learning a lot of them, right? When you're working through different departments, you learn parts of the business. But you also, I'd say the basic thing you have to start out with is being a people person. You're the public face of NBC with all of these visitors who come to see shows, take tours, and obviously that's something you have in spades. Look at the people here that you've been friends with for decades. So, I mean, was there an indication that you would go into show business with your skills, or what were you thinking if it hadn't been this?
See, I always thought it was like tall, pretty girls that were in show business, so I never thought of being an actor that way. I thought, well, maybe I'll be a writer, maybe I'll be a director, but I knew I wanted somehow to be involved with that. And in high school, I did win an award for playing Helen Keller, so perhaps I was. Thank you. Some of you saw the performance. And my director's here. So I did like the idea of being an actor, but I really just thought it was tall, pretty girls that got to be actors. So I never really thought
Okay, I'm going to take a little aside here because she says things like that. Look at you saw some of the pictures. Look at that picture there behind Johnny Carson. Look at that beautiful girl there. Maybe you're not tall, but the rest of it, come on.
Well, but because of that, I kind of just tried to learn everything else I could about the business. And at the time I started, I don't know about some of the other pages, there wasn't a manual that we were given. We just kind of shadowed some of the other pages around and picked up details. And I mean, we didn't always tell the truth either. We had an hour to kill.
Yeah, what were some of your favorite embellishments? When pages would give tours, I'm going to ask about the different duties of a page, but one of them was giving to the public a tour of the NBC facilities. What were some of your favorite embellishments that your fellow pages would say?
Well, there was an area that was called the Midway between the studio and the administration building, and there was a little mountain out there, and we would tell people that's where Julie Andrews twirled at the beginning of Walton's Mountain. There was that. We told that. And I think it was Michael Darris maybe came up with the one about we couldn't go on to stage 5 because it was filled with water because they were shooting Sea Hunt.
Which had been canceled decades earlier, right?
And people just went, oh, okay. Yeah, we had an hour to kill.
Was there ever any supervisor watching you going, wait a minute, reeling you in?
Well, we did have good supervisors, and they had more important things to tend to than the tour. I mean, it was ushering the shows, getting the people in and out, things like that. I mean, it's represented by my friends that are here today. We were a close group of people, and we're friends, and there was nobody that was busted our chops over what we were saying.
Beside the tour, what were some of the other duties of being a page?
Well, I enjoyed doing limo runs,
Which are?
was we would either take a celebrity to the airport or pick them up at the airport and take them to some event that NBC needed them to attend. So we were kind of the NBC ambassadors there. A lot of this was the press tours that we'd be doing. And my friend Pete here had like the ultimate limo run when he had Gilda Radner.
Great chapter in the book, Pete. That's what great stories that is, bonding with Gilda.
Oh yeah, that was great.
Yeah, and it's he kidnapped her for a couple hours.
It was her idea.
Yeah, she wanted to be kidnapped. She wanted to see Hollywood in 4 hours, and who better than Pete to show it to her?
And Gilda would be a good example. You know, even today, when one is asked to babysit a major star, they can be difficult. Back in the day, you know, when maybe cocaine might have been in the mixture for some people wanting stuff, what were some of the, you don't have to say who wanted the cocaine, but who were some of the most interesting people to do limo runs with?
I was in a limo once with somebody who will remain nameless, who wanted to stop by Jack's house on Mulholland to pick up something before getting on an airplane. And I was like, no, we can't do that. No, that's all I needed was to have my star get arrested, and I would have been responsible for it. And you know, and maybe I was a little naive, or maybe I was just too broke, or I was too busy trying to hustle getting a job, but I wasn't involved with the drugs. That wasn't my thing at all while I was there.
But that's why I say it's 30 Rock meets Minx, because there are stories of other celebrities who certainly were partaking in the 70s and 80s, and you don't name necessarily names, of course, but it's part of the milieu of the time you were working.
Well, there's somebody here in the room, Tommy Chasick, who had a celebrity on a press tour, who will remain nameless. It's in the book, where she liked to have a little something extra in her morning coffee. So while they were going around during the press tour, she was slowly loosening up, and she wanted another cup of coffee, and one of the affiliates said, oh, I'll get you coffee, and she was, no, Tommy knows how I like my coffee.
I like how I went for the salacious right away. I didn't even let you get into the duties of a page before I went there. But you know, speaking of the duties of a page, I know that we have pages here in the audience, and there are several of whom that you thought might share their stories, right? So,
absolutely.
Would you like to pick out?
Well, Neil.
Neil.
Who remembers Neil Weiner? Stand up. And Neil is mentioned throughout the book as well, but he has some wonderful recollections of when he was a page.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say Shelley was the queen of the page staff. I believe that then, I believe that now. But she was an amazing person, and she did a great job in this book. What Shelley wanted me to talk about was around noontime we would get Orange Coast tours, and these tours had to go like the wind. You had an hour, like she kept saying you got an hour, but we had to roll them through. And if we were running a lot of tours, sometimes we were doing 8 tours a day. So on one of the times, I took out a group, and we usually go left or right depending on the traffic. I don't even know what direction, but I do remember getting to the stage outside of Chico and the Man, and I was giving my spiel, telling, you know, anything I could make up. That's not true. But a lot of stuff. And my eye catches a woman who's putting her hand down her blouse, and I'm like, I'm 21, trying to hold on. What's going on? What am I? At that moment, she starts to breastfeed her kid, her child, and I lost it because I didn't know whether I had come from the left, I come from the right, I forgot what I said, I was starting to repeat myself, and it was one of those moments that, you know, we never, we got to share these stories, but that's, you know, one of the stories, but it was the most fun job in the world, but also we also ran the kingdom there. So that's my thing, and I hope you if you haven't read the book, please do. It's phenomenal. She did a great job. Some really great stories, and even some that I had forgotten about. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. You talk in the book about the different kinds of gigs that there were in terms of different duties that you could get, some that were an honor, some that were a pain in the neck. Any that you want to talk more about all the different things you were required to do? I mean, I know some of the shows were some more demanding than others, or had different?
Well, working some of the shows, if you got the Tonight Show to work that thing, that train ran on time all the time. But sometimes if you were working like the midnight special, you might be getting double overtime on that. There's one instance, I don't think Tom Hansen is here, but he worked the Richard Pryor show when they were taping that. And it went into, you couldn't even pay them enough. It was horrible. And the next day, Eba Hawkins, Jay Michaels, the Burbank Police, the Burbank Fire Department, they all met, the lawyers, all the NBC lawyers, because he went into taping. It was like 4 in the morning when they finished, and they only did one sketch. They did the Star Wars bar sketch. It was supposed to start taping at 8 o'clock, and they finished at like 4 in the morning. Yeah,
That's not good when you have to produce a weekly show and you can do one sketch in for 8 hours.
Yeah, and to his credit, he had his friend Paul Moody was there, and we had about 400 people lined up to come in to see the show. And Tom Hansen says it was like they were dropping tickets from helicopters. Everybody came to see the show, and just before they were ready to let the audience in, Richard said he wanted the first 3 rows to just be black people. And we already had a whole bunch of other people lined up in front. So Paul, very, very smart, he went to the back of the line and grabbed people out of the back of the line that he knew Richard would want to sit in front so they would laugh and Richard would feel comfortable. And that didn't cause a mob scene, but it could have.
Well, yes, and it also reminds me of some of the other things that you or other pages were asked to do that wouldn't fly today. And maybe I'm going for the salacious again, but tell us about pulling tail and what that meant.
Neil!
I never knew, can I just tell you, I never knew that's what it was called. Until I read so.
Yeah, but several of the male pages, especially in line at the Tonight Show, would pick up ladies and get them good seats for the Tonight Show and have a lovely evening with them afterward. And yeah, that was, and I didn't know that was going on.
Tours, okay? We gave them tours.
That's what you called it. That's a euphemism. You gave them tours. Well, and in some of the pages, a friend who I will remain nameless actually married a girl that he pulled from the line.
Well, and I wasn't even doing that to say people making their own dates. I assumed that sometimes it would be to get attractive people in the audience in a certain spot. I mean, weren't you?
But we also got 2 pages that way.
Right, okay.
Alovadia, who the men loved him, the women loved him. They didn't want him to leave. He was a contestant on Wheel of Fortune. And they go, you've got to get a job as a page. You've got to stick around. You got to be. So the people from Wheel of Fortune actually wrote his recommendation so that he could be a page at NBC. And then Sandy Crompton, she was an elementary school teacher, and her connection was one of the VPs at NBC. Well, Frank Grant and a couple of the other guys saw her, and they just didn't want her to leave either. And they said, have you ever thought of being a page at NBC? And they Monday morning put her application on Eba Hawkins' desk, and that's how Sandy got her job. So we pulled good tails sometimes.
And speaking of the Tonight Show, it was a certain honor, right, to be in a sketch with Johnny. Do you want to tell that story about being on camera with him doing?
Well, Stump the Band was the only time.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay. Stump the Band. Johnny would go in the audience, have somebody sing a silly song, and then the page would give them, there's envelopes in my hand in the picture, and they'd give them an envelope. Well, they used to do it in a way where if you were the page with the most seniority working on the show that night, you're the one that got picked to be giving out the envelope. But in one case, Courtney Conti did it 3 times. And one time he had, there was 2 very well-endowed women that were singing the song, and Johnny obviously loved what he was singing. So Courtney went through the envelopes real fast, and instead of getting like dinner at Chadney's or the Smokehouse, he found a ride for 2 on the Goodyear blimp. And he gave it to Johnny, so he got a good laugh. But no, that was the only time I was on the Tonight Show.
But were you on camera? Was that on camera? Did your family quell?
That's the big. They had to quell because there was no videotape. there were no tape machines back in the day that we could watch it at home. So yeah, the minute you got done with the Tonight Show, you call everybody up and say, I'm on the Tonight Show tonight. But what was really neat for me is they picked me to do it. Dinah didn't get to do it. I got to do it. And they sat me down in a makeup chair, and Ed McMahon was sitting next to me. And Harry Blake put my makeup on. And I had seen Harry Blake's name like on Laugh-In, and the Dean Martin Show was the head of the makeup department. And here Harry Blake was doing my makeup. So that was kind of cool. I like that.
We have one other page here that I think that you wanted to cue a story from Roxanne.
Yeah, Roxanne. Honey, here's a microphone.
Mine is another, my story is another one giving a tour. I was in my early 20s and I was not feeling well, and I was standing by the Hollywood Squares set trying to tell the tour, group all about the Hollywood Squares and the different people in there, and I was feeling really, really sick. Next thing I know, I've passed out, and I heard later on that CPO Sharkey was being taped right at the next studio, and that Don Rickles and Peter Isaacson came out and they got their arms around me and managed to get me to the nursing station. So that was one of my wonderful stories about great celebrities doing really nice things. And to top it off, after that, so many of my fellow pages came to visit me in the hospital when I was really sick. So I totally appreciated that.
Roxanne, tell the story about how you used to say there was no smoking, eating, drinking, or taking pictures on the tour.
Okay, here's another tour I was on. I'm walking backwards, and we have that little gray skirt and the navy blue blazer, and I'm walking backwards, and I'm almost getting towards Johnny Carson, where he parks his car, and I walked back, and I either flipped back on a speed bump or something, and I fell down. My gray skirt fell on top of my face, and I'm standing there with my laying down actually with my underwear, and there was like complete silence. The whole tour group just didn't know what to do, and luckily there was a really great guy in the tour group, and he looked at me and he goes, "Are you sure you can't take pictures on this tour?" And everybody laughed. Thank God.
Roxanne brought up something that I wanted to just point out. I mean, among the skills you were expected to have is CPR, right? So you actually performed CPR, because people would be passing out in the heat. This is Burbank.
Oh yeah, they try to do Universal Studios and the Tonight Show and everything all in one day. But Tim Danker and I were very insistent about learning this new thing called CPR. And we finally got the nurse to allow us to take the class. And the day we finished the class, sure enough, somebody passed out in line at the Tonight Show. And I felt like the $6 Million Man, because I was like taking off my blazer and I'm running in slow motion and I'm look, listen, and feel, I'm trying to do all the stuff you did CPR. And this was before the Staying Alive song, so we had different compressions back in the day. And finally get there, and the guy, he was still breathing, and his wife says, "Our son is an EMT and you're doing a very good job." So we made sure he was okay. We got him in an ambulance, took him over to St. Joe's. I told them I'd get them tickets for the Tonight Show another day, but they couldn't use it. So about a month later, this enormous box shows up at NBC addressed to me, and I didn't know what it was all about. And it turns out the guy was like the president of the 3M Tape Corporation. And in this box was videotape, Christmas tape, packing tape, and spit curl tape, and I give you the tape and all the pages. But it was very kind that way. You need some tape?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you still have it? I want to set the scene because today those Burbank studios unfortunately are no longer, right? And these were the NBC Burbank. But back in the day, they were a hotbed of production. It was The Tonight Show, Hollywood Squares, Password, Chico and the Man, Sanford and Son, Midnight Special, and some variety shows like Dick Clark's and Dick Van Dyke. And so were you working on all of those shows, or would you get assigned to just one, or how would it work?
We would rotate the different positions, but there was a job that was called the CB, which is a term that was client's booth, so that in the old days when advertisers used to watch the shows as they were being taped, they would have their own special area, and the page would tend to them and make sure they got their phone calls and their drinks and their cigarettes or whatever else they needed back then. So sometimes somebody would be assigned. Pete, you were a CB on a lot of shows, weren't you?
Yeah, a few. McLean Stevenson show. You remember that?
We'll get to McLean.
13 weeks and out.
But Pete would be assigned, and any of us would be, and that would be our show. In fact, Lisa Mattingly, she couldn't be here tonight. She got to be the CB on a show that Ringo Starr was doing, and the phone was ringing, and she picked up the phone, and this woman said that she needed to talk to Ringo. It was his ex-wife, and she says, "And I'll have your job if you don't put him on the phone immediately." And it scared the hell out of Lisa. So she very sheepishly knocked on Ringo's dressing room door and said, "I'm sorry, but your wife keeps calling and she said she'd have my job." Well, if I'm doing Lisa, she said I'd have your job. Sorry, Lisa. She said, your ex-wife said she'd have my job if I didn't put you on the phone. And Ringo said, "Darling, she couldn't do your job." So being a CB and having that kind of access was good. I mean, there was one time Courtney Conti was working Midnight Special, and Jeff Wald, who was married to Helen Reddy at the time, and she was hosting Midnight Special before Wolfman Jack did, he said to Courtney, "Oh boy, could you go out and get me my lunch?" And you don't say that to Courtney, no. And he said, "Sir, I can't. I'm the CB here. I can't leave my position right here." And Jeff Wald took the phone and threw it at Courtney. But if you remember, they still had cords on phones back then. They just kind of bounced back. And then, as karma having a way of doing things, Courtney later became like the executive in charge of production at Carsey Warner, and Jeff Wald was handling Roseanne Barr. And Courtney goes, "Hey, you remember me?" And Jeff laughed it off and he said, "I used to do a lot of cocaine and I'm really sorry that I did that." And they mended their friendship.
I would say that's double karma, because not only did he encounter Courtney again, but he was managing Roseanne Barr.
Yeah.
So, karma gone. But speaking of particularly phone calls, I love the story in the book. I mean, it's interesting how show business interacts with real life in ways that it could be momentous. The phone call for Johnny Cash that came through, because I know phone calls you were not supposed to interrupt taping for a phone call for the star, but
it turns out Jim McDonald, hi Jim, Jim was the CB working a Johnny Cash special, and he got a phone call from the governor of Utah and said, "Gary Gilmore would like to speak to Johnny Cash." And Jim ran into the studio and went like, "Stop the tape, stop the tape."
And it was the last day for Gary Gilmore.
Yeah,
we should
the
say.
last couple hours of Gary Gilmore. And Jim walked over, whispered in Johnny Cash's ear. Johnny set his guitar down, went into the hallway, and talked to Gary for 45 minutes, and went back into the studio. And at the time Gary was being executed, Johnny Cash stopped tape and said a little prayer. And so that's sometimes you find yourself in those kind of situations. I had a very lovely situation where I knocked on a celebrity's dressing room door. It's a wonderfully long story. Did any of you remember Sadie? Did you ever? She made these horrible cookies with no sugar in them that she'd give the pages. But she was kind of like the Mrs. Miller, where she would come to the tapings, and Red Fox adored her and would slip her $100 every now and then. It was his good luck charm. And one day we're standing outside, and Sadie says, "What's going on next door?" I said, "Frank Sinatra's doing the Tonight Show." She says, "Well, Frank bailed me out of jail once." And I said, "Oh, really?" And Sadie, at the time, was 82 when she's telling me the story, and she had lived across the street from the Sportsman's Lodge. And there was a gathering of the American Nazi Party at Sportsman's Lodge. And Sadie married an O'Sullivan, but she was a Jewish lady and just could not stand to have the Nazis in her neighborhood. So she went over there and hit a Nazi with her purse, got arrested. And before she could even be totally processed, they said, "Okay, Sadie, you're allowed to leave." And she says, "Nobody knows I'm here." And she got a telegram that said, "Way to go, Sadie, love, Francis Albert." And Frank bailed her out of jail. So I couldn't let that story just stay there. So I knocked on Red Fox's dressing room door, And he didn't expect to see a perky little page, I'm sure. And I said, do you know Frank Sinatra? And he went, yeah. I said, do you like him? Yeah. And I told him the Sadie story. He held up tape, took Sadie over to the Tonight Show to meet Frank so she could thank him.
One of the things that strikes me about the book and about, I'm sure, being a page is the access to talent. And yet I know a lot of times when you're working in production, you can't be seen as a fawning fan. You have to maintain a veneer of professionalism at least. But what were the times that you were able to really bond with somebody? I know you have a great picture in the book with Jimmy Stewart.
Oh yeah.
Tell me that story.
Well, that was fun, and I can speak for most of my friends here. We don't have a lot of pictures of ourselves with celebrities because we had to act like we were professional.
And it was before the iPhone era, right? So
Yeah, right. Yeah, this was a Polaroid. This was the picture that was taken. And Jimmy Stewart came to the Tonight Show, and his limo driver asked if I could take a picture of him with Mr. Stewart. And I did, and then Jimmy Stewart, to his credit, says, well, let me take a picture with the little lady. And we took that picture. And about 6 hours after that, I was rushed to the hospital because all of a sudden I got really swollen glands and I had a fever. Turns out I had hepatitis. And the last words I remember in the ER was, somebody call Jimmy Stewart. I don't want to be the one who kills Jimmy Stewart. So we had that time. And then I guess we met everybody back in the day, but I am so grateful that I got to meet Harry Chapin. And he was my hero. And I had been seeing him every summer at the Greek Theater, and George Glovna got me tickets. We sat in the front row, and I was wearing a cast on my leg, and my foot is up like this for the whole concert. So the next day, we're back at the Tonight Show, and I called George. I go, Harry's at the Tonight Show, let's go see him. So I got on my crutches and hobbled backstage, and before I could even say hello to him, he looked at me and went, you were at my concert last night. So I got to meet Harry Chapin, so that was really nice.
Tell me about working with Johnny Carson.
Well, I had a little bit of background on him because I knew Corey Carson, Johnny's son. When the Tonight Show moved out to California in 1972, Corey moved in with the Shelley Cohen family. If Doc couldn't conduct the band and if Tommy Newsom couldn't conduct the band, then Shelley Cohen did. So that was the pecking order. And fun fact, Shelley Cohen and Ed and Johnny were the only three people that stayed the whole time since October 1st, 1962 from doing the Tonight Show. Game show people. So he lived with them while they were getting settled. So I kind of knew that little aspect of life, but I'll tell you with Johnny, he was somebody who knew what needed to be done. Like I said, the train ran on time. It was fun to watch him rehearse the Mighty Carson art players, or if he was doing a sketch with somebody, because you could see his how his mind was working, and he was very respectful of Bobby Quinn of directing him and things like that. But he liked not just being in a suit and tie all the time. And it was fun. I don't know if any of you ever thought of having your tour just happen to be there when Johnny pulled up at 1:50 every day. He would get out of the car and he would usually say something like, the tour is a ripoff, get your money back, and it just made the day of all of the tourists. And then also what we discovered, a couple of us pages went back to NBC just before it was sold. And it turns out that Johnny's office downstairs, he used to have an office on the second floor, and it had a big window in the front. And that was the whole thing with Red Fox, wanted a big window too, so he could be like Johnny Carson. But the big window suddenly became a security problem for Johnny, so they moved him downstairs into what was our Page Lounge, and became what was a safe room for Johnny. And we discovered that there was a secret door that led to a tunnel that led underneath that midway area into the administration building. And that's when Johnny did the last Tonight Show. Rather than going out and greeting people when it was over, he went down to the office, he went downstairs, went out through the tunnel, out to the helipad, and flew to his house where he had a big party. And it was an invitation-only party, but It was kind of a little sneaky tunnel he had there in his office, I gotta tell you.
Well, if he needed to make a quick getaway, as such as on an emotional day like that, right? He'd already been probably cried his way through the show, and
or if you wanted to sneak somebody in, perhaps.
Oh, yeah.
There was also that opportunity.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the one saying that this time. One of the things that strikes me too is that when you're a page like that, I presume you have to mind your P's and Q's and not overstep, and yet you're in this program for 18 months, and your goal is to make as many contacts as you can because you want to parlay this into a career. What were the times where you made connections while you were still in the program that paid off later?
Well, I tell the story in the book, and I say I was using my Lucy Ricardo thinking cap, because the one executive I wanted to meet at NBC was Dick Ebersol. And at the time, he was like the youngest executive, and he and Lorne Michaels started Saturday Night Live. And I thought, if I could just meet Dick Ebersol, and he would like me, and I'd have my whole career at NBC, and everything would be perfect. Well, I couldn't get through. His secretary would not set up a meeting for me. So I'm driving home late one night, listening to talk radio, and all of a sudden I hear, and the next guest on the show is Dick Ebersol. And I was at the Wood Lake exit on the 101 freeway. I pulled off the freeway, shoved a bunch of coins into a payphone at the Shell station. It was pouring rain, and I told the call screener some bogus story about, tell me about Gilda. I didn't. And I got on the air, and they said, okay, caller, what's your question? And I said, hi, my name is Shelley Herman, and I've been trying to get a meeting with Dick Ebersol for months now, but his secretary won't put me through. So will you promise me on the air right here and right now that you'll make an appointment to see me? And he said, yes.
Whoa, go Shelley!
That's the way it's done.
Well, and I always say, like, to people looking for a job, I know we got some youngins in the audience here today, but for those people who are looking for a job, I always say, like, try to find a way that people want to meet you rather than have to meet you. And find a creative way to get to them somehow. And that's how I got to Dick Ebersol.
And I love the chutzpah, for lack of any other word, that takes. But also, did you have to have that kind of nerve as a woman in the program? Was it harder for the women than it was for the men back then, or even now?
I think it was in some respects, because the men could hang out more with the other guys and learn stuff. And that's where we started touching on the fact that I thought I was doing all the right things. McLean Stevenson it was before Hello Larry, he had a sitcom that was taping at NBC called The McLean Stevenson Show. And in the book, I detail how I had known McLean before I became a page in a very silly way, and it was very funny, but it made it very clear that I wasn't going back to his apartment with him. So when I got to NBC, I thought, I'm going to just observe his show. I'm going to see what the writing's like. I'm going to, I'll write a spec script. And then when it's picked up for a second season, maybe I'll have a chance of getting a job as a staff writer. So the same way the guys would hang out and have that kind of access and learn things, I think with the women there was always a little difference with that. So, and to that end, as a page, I was told, McLean wants to see you. And I went to his office and told a couple jokes. McLean and I, it's in the book, but we got married at a Sambo's restaurant, but it wasn't a real marriage, it was just a Sambo's marriage.
But that was actually, you don't cut that story, I want you to give it the proper weight of how funny just that part of the story is, because that was when he was hitting on you that first time he met you, and you found a clever way out of it by doing this like fake marriage instead of going back to his apartment. So you already had encountered him once, found a way to handle him, left it in a cute way to be friends, and then later cut to the Page program, and this is going to happen.
He calls me up to the office, and I said, hi, it's good to talk to you. By the way, I got a divorce at Taco Bell, so we're not married anymore. So we're okay. And we're talking about, how's the show, what's going on, what's the future, and all of a sudden, he pushed the little button under his desk, and the door closed. Well, I start laughing. And it wasn't a nervous laughter, it was just, I couldn't believe this was happening to me. Again, not a tall, beautiful actress, me it was happening to. And I said, oh my God, I said, this is like something out of a Doris Day movie, and you were on the Doris Day show, and you're a masher, and you're on MASH. And it was all these thoughts going through my head. But I was supposed to be there in a professional capacity. And then he made some moves on me, and I got away, and then I went down to the Page Lounge, the one that later became Johnny's office, ran into Pete, and he could tell I was a little upset about things. And I said, yeah, I put some serious moves on me. I'm a little bit shaky, but I'll be okay. And Pete said, oh, he does that to all the girls. He followed Sandy Peterson back to the Page Lounge once. And so then I'm pissed off at Sandy Peterson because, like, I'm jealous of her all of a sudden. I mean, that's just like the crazy stuff like 20-year-old girls think about, you know? But
You left out one thing about Sandy Peterson.
Yeah.
Yeah, he followed her into our lounge.
He actually came in the
And
lounge.
he said, can you come out to dinner with me? And she's going, no, I can't. And I just turned around and said, I'll go.
And are you now Mr. McLean's
He did not want to go have dinner.
Yes.
No, I already had that.
He already had the CV job. He did. That's not how he got it. So I mean, there's a lot of confusing things that were going on then, but we all had each other's back. That's the main thing.
Well, that's the theme that we focused on tonight, and certainly it comes through so clearly in the book. There's so much more of your career than you do talk about it in the book, but we focused tonight on the Page program because, as I said, it is the backbone. But when we talk about the rest of your career afterward, what seeds did you plant in the Page program that led to some of those other jobs, and what did you learn in the Page program that helped you do them?
The first and foremost thing are the friends I made, because we all kind of scattered to the wind. And like, I guess, if you're in a fraternity or sorority or something, people help each other along the way. So I learned that. But one of the things that, and I want to touch on this before we run out of time, is we have the initial group of us that are pages. Then we have what we call the page-in-laws, which are the people who married into the Page program. Like, for example, my husband, Randall Carver, is a page-in-law. And then there's another group of people who dated some of the Pages, didn't work out, but we still liked them. So they still come around. And that would be like Steve Goldstein is a page-in-law. And we still gather like maybe every other month we celebrate each other's birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, our parents passing. I mean, it's been 40 plus years of friendship that we've had. And that's the big lesson, and that's why I wrote the book, is because we were going through the pandemic, we were meeting on Zoom. Who knew if we were all going to get through this or not? And people kept saying, somebody needs to write this down. So I wasn't doing anything. So that's why I started sharing these stories. And Steve has a good story. Make it good, Steve. Thank you.
So I'll make it brief. Back in 1983, which is 40 years ago, I met one of the girls in that picture there. She mentioned her before, Dinah. My assistant will point out Dinah. There we go. So I meet this girl, Dinah, in 1983, and within 24 hours of meeting her, I met everybody else. I met all her friends, all the Pages. They're here today.
How did you meet her?
Roxanne's part of this story. It took place in Century City. Dinah at the time was shopping, well, okay, I was in a book at the time.
That's the story.
That's the story. It was probably in this bookstore. Well, this wasn't built yet, but there was a book out back then called Ladies' Choice, A Guide to the Eligible Bachelors of Los Angeles. 100 most eligible bachelors. I was one of them. My mother was sure it was a scam. And, it turned out to be real, and I didn't have to pay anybody to be in that book. So Dinah was shopping with Roxanne at Century City, actually, in a bookstore, shopping for a birthday gift for her ex-boyfriend who came out to her the previous year as gay. And she thought this would be a funny gift to give her gay ex-boyfriend a book of LA's most eligible bachelors. And she's paging through the book. She's thumbing through the book and comes to my page, writes down my contact information, and she contacted me. So the book worked out, you know. So that's how I met Dinah. And within 24 hours of meeting Dinah, she invites me to a birthday party. There's like 30 or 40 of these Pages, well, 25 or so. Rox and Pete and Shelley and all these people, the people in the picture, and about twice as many as that. So I became instantly a page-in-law. And these people became, this was 40 years ago, and they're among my closest friends in life right now. I mean, still, right? So, you are, right? So the reason I tell you this story is to tell you this one. About a year later, 1984, we find out that Paul McCartney is going to be on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And we decide we're going. We're going to be in the audience. We're going to see Paul McCartney. And we knew before we went to the show that we were going to be allowed backstage after the show by the very people whose job it is to keep people out of the backstage area. The pages, God bless them. You know, these are the current pages letting in their friends, the former pages, which now included me. I was a page-in-law. So we knew we were going to maybe meet Sir Paul McCartney. One of the pages, is Gay Linville here? She's not.
No.
Okay. One of the pages who became a TV executive, her name was Gay Linville. She had just gotten back from England, and she took the Liverpool tour, the Beatles tour of Liverpool. And she came back with like 100 photographs, actual photographs that you got printed at the, photo mart. The little 3x5 photographs. And she had us all over to her house that day and said, you can go through these photographs and pick any one single photograph that you like to take with you to bring to Paul to see if maybe he'll sign it. We thought, what a great idea. So I'm going through these photographs, and I come to this one picture. It's a picture of the St. Peter's Church Hall in Woolton, Liverpool, Woolton Village, where it's the spot where in 1957, 15-year-old Paul McCartney first met 16-year-old John Lennon. John's band was playing that day, the Quarrymen. He met Paul. A week later, he invited Paul to join the band. So to me, that picture depicted ground zero in the planting of the seed of the Beatles. So I took that picture with me. I put it in my pocket. And sure enough, after the Tonight Show, we were escorted backstage. And we lined up along this long hallway with lots of other people. Those pages were doing a terrible job. There was a lot of people back there. And they're all holding album covers and posters and memorabilia and just large items for Paul to sign. And we're just standing there waiting for him to come out of the dressing room, walk down this hallway to the exit door at the end of the hall, and exit the building. So we're all standing there. The door opens, Paul McCartney walks out of the dressing room, and he's walking down the hall, and people are shoving things in his face, album covers, posters, 8x10 glossies. They're just handing, and he's walking and signing, never stops, never looks up, just signing things, handing it back, signing, handing it back, walking, trying to get to the end of the hallway. I hand him my little 3x5 photograph of St. Peter's Church, and this stopped him dead in his tracks. He stopped for the only time. He stopped, he looks at the picture, he looks at me, looks at the picture, and I said, do you recognize it? He goes, yeah, I recognize it. And he signed the picture, and he handed it back to me, and then kept walking and signing it out the door. So that picture and that autograph is in the book. So if you want Paul McCartney's autograph, buy the book. Thank you.
So he is now a page adjacent.
Now, if I were a nice person and good friend, I'd probably end on that happy feel-good moment. However, there's a question I want to ask you, and I want to embarrass you with it and put you on the spot.
Try.
You know what the question is. It's a question everybody asks when they read this book. Obviously, what I love is talking with Randy even before this, he was saying that he did meet you back in this day, but you two were not married at that point. And what I love about the book is it is set in the 70s, and it's kind of, if I say it's 30 Rock meets Minx, maybe it's 30 Rock meets Sex in the City too. And you talk about a couple of boyfriends, one of whom, you see, now she knows where I'm going. One of whom, this is the question everybody's going to ask if you've read the book, when you read the book, and I don't think we're going to get out of her, but maybe we'll get some clues. Who's Jake?
Okay, here's the deal. I had fun. But with this particular person, and you'll have to read the story, it was really terrific. But I didn't know he was married.
You look for the tan line. Aren't you supposed to? Don't you know you look for the tan line?
Okay, I'm 20-something. I didn't know that married men hit on people that they I'm married, but hey, how about it? No, I didn't know that. And I went out with this person, and we had a great time. And I don't want his wife and kids to get the shrapnel from it. But it was just an important passage in my life to see how, because I was trying to be that girl. I was trying to be Mary Richards. I was trying to be Gloria Steinem. I was trying to be all those people. and being liberated came with certain consequences. So that's what that story, and the reason he's named Jake is because I was trying to think of a name that none of these people would guess. And I was watching the State Farm ad.
Now I know. I have to tell you, when I was reading the book and reading the Jake chapter, which is a kind of steamy chapter, I have to say.
Thank you.
The name Jake, I guess because he was in a show recently with the name Jake playing a single guy, I was picturing John Stamos. And I can tell you, having asked Shelley, the one clue I can give you is it is not John Stamos.
No, it is not. And some of my page friends, I'll tell you who Travis really is, but the rest of you don't need to know. But that's another person who I had to change the name because I actually have met his wife and kids, and she doesn't know we ever dated, so I don't want to mess it up with her.
Yes, for all the juicy parts. Well, the stories are juicy. They're both relevant to the 70s in terms of a great way to experience that again, but also applicable to today. And so many of them are about some of the greats. When you talk about Jimmy Stewart, Frank Sinatra, Johnny Carson, Ringo, these are stories that could have...
I talked about Elvis. I saw Linda here. Yeah?
These are stories that could have been lost. And so when you talked about during COVID, when all your page friends and you talked about somebody's got to put this all down, thank you for putting it all down. Thank you for doing this. And of course, Shelley will be signing her books now. Shelley Herman, everybody. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, before she's signing books, we're going to take questions from the audience. Thank you for reminding me.
Are there any? Is there anything left?
Yeah. Libby. Libby, you have a question? You can either say it loud or do you need a mic?
Do I need a mic?
When has Libby ever needed a mic?
Yeah. I was remembered in 6th grade for my soft voice. Hello.
Hi, sweetie.
I'd like to know if any of the people on the tour ever caught you and said anything about the Julie Andrews twirling story on the mountain.
No, they didn't care. No, they totally didn't care. But we would also say things like, you have to rent these floor tiles, and it's 75 cents per floor tile, and it's $40,000 a month for the electric bill. And they were just like numb to the facts. They just wanted to see a star. That's all. They didn't care about the tour.
And then on a more serious note, was there a percentage of people generally for each 18 months who, then went on to really make it big versus like with the TV Academy programs, not everybody actually ends up making it. So what was the ratio there? Was it pretty much almost 100% that people did go on?
I think what was really good about it is that some people found out what they didn't want to do. And that I think was also important. I know with Neil, because of the connections he made at NBC, he had his own production company, post-production company afterward. Roxanne parlayed her knowledge working at NBC into PR at UCLA.
And that's where I worked with her.
Yeah.
In addition to all these people here, who are some of the famous people we know who went through the Page program?
Well, I'm gonna do a plug for Pete Hammond, because anybody who reads Deadline or has ever seen a movie ever in their life has probably seen Pete's handiwork as being a reviewer and a critic for movies. He's had a wonderfully successful career, and he and his wife Madeline are like the Lutton Fontaine of this town when it comes to movies. They are so well respected and so well liked for what they do. Other people that were famous pages: Chuck Barris, Regis Philbin, Hugh Downs, Aubrey Plaza, contemporary person who was a page. Grant Tinker had been a page. So a lot of people. Frederick Forrest, who recently passed away. And it's funny because a lot of people take these experiences out into the real world. And it's just invaluable because you have to think on your feet. I'm still in Andy Goldberg's improv class. You still have to just try to make it up as you go along, and this trains you for that sort of thing. To really know what to say to people and hopefully have them respond in a positive way.
We have another question here.
Hi. How did your meeting with How did your meeting with Mr. Ebersol go?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. I was so excited about it, and I had the meeting at his office, and the first thing he said was, "You have to leave NBC." And I was like, oh my God, it took me, all this time to get here. And he said, if you leave NBC and go work someplace else, they will value you more, and they'll hire you back, and you'll make much more money.
Huh.
So that was his big lesson. And at the time, he was married to the woman who, before Vanna White was turning the letters at Wheel of Fortune, he was married to a woman named Susan Stafford. And I have a whole story in the book about their 18-day courtship before they got married. So, so that was pretty wild too.
Michael?
Michael?
Okay.
Well, did somebody get him out?
No. Thanks. You've already kicked me out once. But
He's the first person I tried to kick out of NBC.
yeah, and it worked almost. But after
Except why didn't it work?
well, because I knew somebody,
And who did you know?
an actress named Lucille Ball.
Yeah.
But after that experience, well, what I was trying to say is, you introduced me to a celebrity, and he was doing the Van Dyke and Company. His name was Andy Kaufman, and it was before the show really aired. And I remember he was wearing overalls, and you said, "Michael, you got to get his autograph." And I was like, I didn't trust you. I really didn't trust you because I thought you were getting back at me. So I didn't ask for his autograph that day. No, I did not. But he asked me what I should sign autographs with. I mean, like, what should I write? And I said, well, Freddie Prinze writes "Looking Good," and Jimmy Walker signs "Dynamite." He says, well, I always say "Thank you very much." And I said, well, then that's what you need to write. And I still didn't get it because I didn't trust him, or I didn't trust you, and I still never got it. But you introduced me to him, so I'll never forget that.
Well, and then the PS to that story is when I was hanging around with Andy, he said, oh, they want me to do this sitcom, and I don't want to do it, but my manager wants me to do it. But don't watch it, it's not very good. And it was Taxi. And for those of you who know me, I married Randall Carver, who was on the first season of Taxi, playing John Burns. There's a sort of a theme running through the book about all my life's a circle, and from the first chapter, meeting Elvis, to the last chapter, you'll see that, and for those of you who write books, you start off writing a book and you go like, well, I'm going to do it this way, and this is the way I want to do it, and then the book tells you what it's going to be. And it really did come full circle for me, and seeing so many friends here too, it means so much to me because it is a full circle moment for me.
Any questions?
Okay, so first of all, how could you know me all these years and not tell me you met Elvis?
I didn't want to break your heart.
Yeah. But I'm wondering,
tell everybody, you were the president of his
fan club when I was 12 years old. And I did see him in person in 1957 in concert. And now I'm friends with Priscilla, and Elvis is a huge part of my life, but Shelley knows all that. But I'm just wondering why you decided to do this now, and why you didn't do it sooner, because it's a great subject.
Well, we all know each other's stories, and maybe we were just a little bit bored with hearing them over and over again, so I wasn't really that excited about retelling things. But then again, when Zoom happened and we could start connecting with some of our Page friends who moved out of the Los Angeles area, and we started hearing more stories, and Michael mentioned Freddie Prinze. There's two women that I spoke to, Maggie and Linda, who both had very different experiences with Freddie Prinze. Maggie had a very pristine friendship with him, and Linda was with him the night he died. And the two of them had never discussed that with each other before. And it was very therapeutic for both of them to be, Maggie's in Arizona now and Linda is in South Carolina. So things started being, little puzzle pieces started getting put into place. And then the stories to me started becoming more poignant. And that's why now rather than any other time. And thank you for being here.
Glad you did it. Glad to be here.
Can you tell me the process of how you came about to writing your book? You mentioned Zoom, and then from there the book wrote itself, but I just want to hear more about it. And how the stories just fell on the page, or the process even of finding said stories and reaching out to people and stuff like that?
Well, I joined a writers group because I knew the stories, and we all chuckle at them, but in the writers group, the people kept saying, okay, we know what happened, but how did you feel? And that's when the whole thing changed for me, because I then injected myself more into the stories than rather than telling the stories, I was reliving the stories. And then it took about 2.5 years to do the whole thing. And then like another 2 years to edit it. No, it didn't take quite that long, but it was a process. And if anybody wants to write a book and wants to talk to me about it, I can give you a lot of shortcuts, because I didn't know what I was doing when I was doing it. And that's part of it, is if you're too naive to know that you can't do it, you know, I just did it.
But I have to say, for those of you who haven't read the book yet, it is very writerly. You do know how to do it, because these stories are structured so well that that's why I view them, maybe because I have a TV focused mind, as episodes, because there is a beginning and a middle and an end to these stories that you really have crafted them beautifully.
Thank you.
Questions? Elaine?
It's not really a question, it's just saying thank you, because if you're ever kind of down or blue or whatever, just pick up the book and randomly turn to a page, because there is always a funny story, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Thank you. I loved it.
Thank you.
I have an observation and a question. It's so nice to see that so many nice people were working together, and that they became such good friends. Who was doing the hiring at this time to find such good people? Because you all seem like really wonderful people.
Well, there was a woman who was in charge of the Page program by the name of Eva Hawkins. Yeah, Eva Hawkins, yeah. And the other person that was instrumental in the Page program too is a guy by the name of Jay Michaels. And he's quite a character. He's somebody who was very instrumental in the whole Joan Rivers, Johnny Carson thing, and that's outlined in the book a lot. But Jay Michaels was in charge of talent relations and the Page staff. And the type of joker that Jay was, there used to be Crohn's Chocolatiers. I don't know if they're still in Beverly Hills or not, but there was one celebrity, I don't know who it was, who had like royally screwed up something, and Jay had ordered a life-size chocolate toilet to be delivered to him. He had horrible, filthy nicknames for all of us, and he'd be the first person. Pete, somebody ratted Pete out for something he didn't do, and Jay came to his defense immediately, and Jay had you delivering Johnny Carson's Christmas gift to him every year, didn't he?
Yeah, well, 1 year, yeah.
1 year, yeah.
I was chosen as Page to deliver his anniversary gift. Take it up to the office. Fred DeCorda was standing there, all of that. It wasn't a warm moment.
But then Billy Freebairn Smith, Billy was the secretary in the Page department. She later worked for Fred DeCordova, and she says everybody was afraid of Fred, but then somebody had said to her, it might have been Linda Perry, said, "Oh, nobody listens to Fred. Just don't pay attention to him." And then she was able to feel comfortable working with him.
Oh, exactly. No, it was kind of an amazing experience in that way. You really got the insight. You don't get that now. I don't think you could replicate what we were able to do. It doesn't exist anymore. And bosses like Jay Michaels would be in jail.
Yeah. But again, he had the Page's backs. He was good that way, but there were other parts of him that were his downfall, unfortunately.
But he was a good guy.
Bring the mic over here.
Is Ira?
Yeah. Wow. No wonder you're doing really well. That was really good. I was just wondering if you had any Joan Rivers stories. This is the first moment you said that really out loud. Joan Rivers, any insight on how the thing went down between Johnny and Joan, and why he got so upset about the Joan Rivers thing?
It's detailed in the book, but the happy Joan Rivers story is a few of us thought that we were funny and we wanted to write jokes for Joan, And she paid us $7 a joke. Linda Levinson wrote for her. Tommy, you wrote for her, didn't you? Yeah, Tommy Chasik did. I think Dale Woodward did. And I wrote, she only bought one joke of mine. I don't even remember what it was anymore, but you'd have to give her like a list of like 10 jokes, and she'd pick one, but then maybe the other jokes would somehow slip into her act also. There was that sort of thing. But the thing with Joan is The Tonight Show had said to her, you are going to be the permanent guest host. Johnny owned the show at the time. He picked her. He liked her. He mentored her. And when The Tonight Show people kept saying to her, Joan, you've got to tone it down a little bit. It's too much mean humor. That's not who our audience is. She started resenting the fact that they were telling her what to do. So when this list of names came around of people who could possibly replace Johnny, and Letterman's name wasn't on it, Jay Leno's name wasn't on it. The only one that I know who saw it, they said David Brenner's name was on the list.
And it was way before Johnny actually retired, right?
Yeah, and Johnny had not even said, he was a limited schedule, but not retiring. And Joan, and also on this note it said, you have no home here. So Joan and Edgar took that as, you know, F you, Johnny, we're gonna go cut a deal someplace else. And there are no secrets in this town. And Peter LaSalle begged her not to do it. She tried to recruit Peter to go work on her late night show. And Johnny knew about it before she tried to call. And yes, she did try to call him and he hung up the phone. Yeah. But it's detailed a little bit more, and Jay Michaels wrote the memo. He was a practical joker. It's a joke that probably got out of hand. And that's what happened.
Questions? Oh.
Less of a question than a share. I think one reason you guys should really read this book is, and Shelley has hinted at this, that what, you know, that experience was then just doesn't exist anymore. And it was a very special time and a very special group of people. And I think that if you sit down and open the pages, you'll get a really good idea of what just a special moment it was.
Greg was there.
Yes.
You weren't there very long while I was there, though.
No.
I was there a couple months, and you'd already gotten a real job.
Yeah. Jay Michaels' nickname for me was who? But really quickly, I remember one time when I did like the Stump the Band, but it wasn't when Johnny was there. It was when Joey Bishop was there. And Joey was up there in the stands, and a woman grabbed the mic from him. And he just like looked at me, looked at her, looked at me, smacked me. And one of the great things about this job is it teaches you how to think really quickly, because people who know me know that I have a slightly combative personality sometimes. And I had this whole vision going in front of my eyes of my taking Joey Bishop down on the steps of the Tonight Show. And then I opened my eyes, took a breath, and smiled, and went on to have something of a career. But really, read this book because there's a lot of really good and very special stuff and people in there. So.
Thank you, Greg.
I think we have time for about 2 or 3 more questions. I see 3 hands, so I think that'll be it.
I don't even need that, So when your book is made into a series, who would you like to see cast to play you?
Me with good lighting.
All right.
I like that answer.
And Susie, did you have a question?
Yes.
You had a certain number of months to find another job. What was your next job?
My next job I got in a very wonderful way. I mentioned that my broken leg. So when I wasn't able to give tours of the building, they assigned me to the story department where I was reading scripts. And I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna try to advance my career now. I'm gonna go take a shorthand class. And after the second day of the shorthand class, I was in tears. And I couldn't do it. It was horrible. And Janet Greek she's a director now. She came over to me and she said, why are you upset? And I'm never gonna be in showbiz. I can't learn shorthand. And she says, if you don't want to do something for a living, never learn how to do it. Bing! And then it turned out she was dating one of the vice presidents, Chuck Gerber, up in the O&O department. And there was an opening there, and she thought if I went up there to be his secretary, I could keep an eye on him if he was cheating on her or anything. So that's how I got my job off the page staff.
You have so many stories in the book, and I'm sure, well, basically, is there going to be a part 2? I know there must be some stories that didn't make it.
Thank you, Glozell.
Save those for the series.
Yeah. If somebody buys this as a TV series, there's so many stories. And they're not all just dirty stories and sex, drugs, and rock and roll stuff. It's friendship. It really is. And it's a very magical time in all our lives. So yeah, there are a lot more stories.
And one last question. Make it a good one.
Bring us home, Maggie.
Bring us home.
Okay, girl. How can we help you turn this into the series we all want to see? Now, other than we're gonna buy this, where can we do a review?
What you could do is talk to the producers and end the Writers Guild strike. Because I can't pitch it anywhere. I can't do anything with it right now.
But it'll be over, and then what can we do? This is a good time to put all our effort into whatever, just to get ready.
Spread the word. That's all I can say. Spread the word, and hopefully I've got people that will represent me, and all of you actors will have jobs when all this happens.
Well, you're amazing. I can't wait to read this. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley Herman. Okay, now you will be signing now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Everybody,
you all for being
there
here.
are copies of the book, or at least if there still are some left,
There's
at
books,
the register
there's
right
food,
there.
There's water under the table for out of food, but eat, relax, socialize, enjoy, and thank you all for being here.
Do you want me to keep recording?
Pour to the last person.
Right, the last drop. Squeeze it out.
I think that what the bookstore is prefer is that you get the book first at the register back there, and then come get in line with Shelley. Oh, Shelley, would you like a group photo with all your page guests? Let's announce it. Thank you for that. Thank you. All the pages, will you please gather with Shelley here by the table, and we'll take a group photo? And the page adjacents, of course.
Hello.
You did a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh my God. He's not a fan.
Everybody needs to.
I know such a pro.
You need a water?
No, I've got one over here somewhere. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm well. How are you doing? I know. Yeah. I hope to do it again sometime. When everybody's feeling better and stuff. Yeah.
You're doing such a nice job there. Look at you.
Yeah, I rarely go out.
If you do read the book like that, write a review if you don't mind. If you like it. If you don't like it, don't write it. All three. Good luck to you. I hope you're very successful.
I know. I was going to lay down on the floor.
That was some Q&A. I don't know what I thought because when I was sitting, I thought it was going to be like, oh, yeah. So then they were up higher. Yeah. So I'm shooting underneath. And I'm going from hair to chin to back. But I knew you were covered.
I was able to see the whole, both of those.
Okay, and then some of mine, maybe if you want to do close-ups or something.
Yeah, oh good. Yeah, there's plenty of footage.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, I'm still running, so.
Oh, okay.
Hour and 16 minutes. I can't see her doing what she's doing now.
I took some pictures of her signing.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
And Mika, nice to meet you. Oh, Mika.
Oh, I get it.
Hi. Thank you for coming.
I'm trying to give this mic away and nobody wants to take it.
Susie! Take a
Oh my gosh. Very busy. Yeah, think about it. How long? 1 week at a time. Yeah. For real? It's a, yeah. So the show could has a big stake in it. He's building a studio. But I think it's yes, and It's actually a good picture. So you guys still, well, are you allowed to film game shows?
Oh yeah. Game shows are not part of the contract.
Yeah, okay.
We can go forward.
So, the funny one, that's still going for another year or two? Oh, and you're also doing, what about judge shows?
I'm not doing it. They are next door to us.
Are they coming?
Oh yeah, right in the studio right now.
Oh, so they're like,
we moved everybody here.
Wow.
I mean, just for 2 weeks. Shoot 12 shows a day. So in 3 weeks, the whole season.